It's River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kieffer. Today we focus on two Iowans, a century apart, who understood something fundamental that is often lost when we consider much of the news around the world today, that food is not just a commodity. It is a moral right and a tool of peace. Herbert Hoover was born in a small Quaker community in West Branch, and long before he was president, he fed a continent. During the First World War, he organized the Commission for Relief in Belgium, shipping 5.5 million tons of food to 10 million civilians. They were trapped between a German occupation and a British naval blockade. History called him the Great Humanitarian. 80 years after Hoover, another Iowan, Norman Borlaug of Cresco, won the Nobel Peace Prize. This for developing the high-yield wheat varieties that helped avert famine in India and Pakistan. Borlaug went on to found the World Food Prize in 1986, the highest honor in food and agriculture. The World Food Prize is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Last week, I had the pleasure and honor of being joined in the studio by the man now leading that institution, former Iowa governor and two-time U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack. Vilsack became the World Food Prize Foundation's first ever CEO in 2025. His visit to Iowa reminds us of the legacies of Hoover and Borlaug and of the urgent food security challenges of our moment. Governor Vilsack, nice to see you again in our studio. Wonderful to have you back on the show.
Ben, it's great to be back.
You are in this part of Iowa. Why? Because I know it has something to do with Herbert Hoover.
Absolutely. Each month, I take a trip outside of the Des Moines area to showcase the unique nature of the World Food Prize, but by tying it to an iconic landscape or individual that is known to Iowans and that we take pride in. Herbert Hoover, obviously, as you mentioned, a great humanitarian. Not only the food drive in World War I, but also was asked by President Truman to organize a similar circumstance in World War II for the German people. Extraordinary effort that he undertook, and he also fed people during the 1927 flood that devastated the Midwest. It was just an extraordinary history. The World Food Prize is also extraordinary. It's also unique. There is no Nobel Prize for Food and Agriculture. We are it. It happens and is awarded once a year. It is awarded in only one place in the world, right here in Iowa. And so I think it's important for Iowans to understand and appreciate the link, their heritage, their history, their tradition, our brand, if you will, of humanitarian assistance, of feeding the world, and of being the place and the home of the World Food Prize. So we have a little video where we tie that World Food Prize to, in this case, Herbert Hoover and his humanitarian efforts. Last month, I was in the Quad Cities, and we tied it to Bick Spiderbeck and his extraordinary career in jazz. I was in Mount Ayr several months ago talking about Peggy Whitson, who's an astronaut from that area who spent more time in space than any other American, George Washington Carver. So you get the drift here.
Yep.
Important for Iowans in particular to understand that there are many, many things that are special and unique and one of a kind, and we should be proud of that.
Yeah. And on this particular day, you come to our studio in Iowa City from West Branch, where you were at the Presidential Library of Herbert Hoover. And we know fans of that library, I've been there many times, that museum, know that it's been closed. You were afforded a sneak peek at what's coming to the public. I don't know exactly when, but what can you divulge?
Well, I think they're planning on an opening in August, and what I can tell you is it's been an extraordinary effort on the part of the folks there, and it's going to be a great tribute to the Hoovers, both Hoovers, both President Hoover and Mrs. Hoover. Lou Hoover, of course, had her own career and did some remarkable things, not the least of which was helping to establish the Girl Scouts of America. And she, too, was involved with the Belgian Food Relief Program as a partner with President Hoover. So it's a tremendous set of exhibits that reflect their life of adventure. When they met each other at Stanford University, she was one of the first. In fact, she might have been the first woman admitted to the School of Geology in Stanford's history. And they fell in love, and they traveled the world, and They did a lot of great things. And so great set of exhibits. Had a chance to take a look at some of the archives that they have accumulated there. And it was an opportunity for me to showcase the video that we launched today at the World Food Prize, linking the World Food Prize and Herbert Hoover together.
A quote from Herbert Hoover that really shines brightly, especially against many would call a dark backdrop of our world today. He said, 20 million people are starving. Whatever their politics, they shall be fed.
Well, the number today, globally, of food insecure people is 733 million. The sad reality is that 60 million of that number are children under the age of 5 that are likely going to be stunted because they didn't get adequate nutrition. And here's what people need to understand about this issue. It isn't just in faraway countries. It isn't just in continents like Africa and Asia and in Central and South America. It's also here. Feeding America, which is the largest network of food banks and pantries in the country, will tell you that there are food insecure people in this country, in every single county in the country, including the richest and most well-off counties. There are food insecure families. And 43 million people today are in that category within the U.S. There is, in Iowa, there are roughly 385,000. 1 out of 8 Iowans, 1 out of 6 Iowa children, lives in a food insecure family or circumstance, which means at some point in time in a month, they may not have adequate nutrition. And I believe that President Hoover, Dr. Borlaug, and I think many people listening to the show would find it unacceptable in this country, in this state, that we have that level of food insecurity and hunger.
Let's talk about the second figure mentioned here, Norman Borlaug. He grew up on a farm near Cresco, Iowa, learned to cooperate with kids of different ethnicities, I understand, in a one-room schoolhouse, went on to save, by some estimates, 1 billion lives. 1 billion lives. You have to ask, when we consider Hoover and Borlaug, is there something about an Iowa upbringing that shapes a person toward this kind of work?
Well, when you also could put into that category Henry Wallace and founding the Pioneer Seed Company and George Washington Carver getting his start here in the state, I think there are a number of examples of people who have made a fundamental difference through a life of service and a life of connected to agriculture. And again, it's our heritage. It's who we are, and we should take great pride in it. Dr. Borlaug, humble man, only one of 7 individuals who, in addition to receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, also received the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the Congressional Gold Medal. Only 6 other individuals in the country's history have received all 3 of those awards. So he's in very unique and significant company. Extraordinary man, but his genuine belief was in the farmer. The ability to equip the farmer with the capacity to produce. And I think now what we have is a circumstance where we not only have to produce, but we also have to recognize sort of the disparity of the economics of agriculture today. Large-scale, commercial-scale agriculture, even in difficult times, can survive and can continue to provide. It is the smaller farms that I have deep concern about, the 90% of farms that don't necessarily have large-scale agriculture that have a very difficult time surviving. And, of course, we're going through a very tough spot and tough circumstance now. And some of those very farm families are within the food insecure people we've talked about today.
I want to circle back to more recent events for your reflections on those, but to continue with Norman Borlaug, you mentioned that there is no Nobel Peace Prize for food or agriculture. I understand he tried to get the Nobel Foundation to create that prize. They said no. So he created it on his own.
You know, this is an amazing thing to me. I mean, with all due respect to the Nobel folks, I mean, there's a chemistry prize, there's a math prize, there's a physics prize. None of those prizes would happen without people being fed, and you would think that there would be an acknowledgement of that. So Norm took it upon himself. The Continental Food Company had an award that they used as a marketing tool. They got into a little financial trouble, and they got purchased by Kraft. and Kraft made the decision not to continue with the prize. So it sort of languished. And Norm came along and said, well, by golly, we need to have it. We need to rescue it. The first year or two, the award ceremony took place outside of Iowa. John Ruan, philanthropist, business leader, Bankers Trust, Ruan Trucking, and other enterprises made the decision with Norm that it really should be housed here in Iowa. So it moved to Iowa, and for the last several decades, it's been awarded here in the Des Moines area. We now have and are located at the Hall of Laureates, which was the old city library, Carnegie Library in Des Moines. Beautiful facility, has been renovated, and it's a museum of sorts because it explains the history of some of the major commodities. There's a tremendous artwork that's dedicated to Norm's life and to agriculture, and now we are the home of the World Food Prize and have been so for a number of decades. And we bring the world to Iowa in October to acknowledge, in the past it was 57, this year will be the 57th laureate. These are individuals who have impacted and affected global food security in some positive way. They either have helped increase productivity, or they've increased the safety of food, or they've increased the ability of farmers to have access to land, or they've been government leaders that have created incentives and support programs for farmers in other countries. It's a wide variety of individuals who have been acknowledged and represented by and received the World Food Prize.
My guest today, Tom Vilsack. He's currently the CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation. In fact, the first CEO of the World Food Prize. He started that position in that position in 2025. The World Food Prize marks its 40th anniversary today. More of my conversation with Tom Vilsack when we return. It's River to River from IPR News. Back with more of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kieffer, going back to a recent conversation from last week with Tom Vilsack, former Iowa governor, former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture under Presidents Obama and Biden, now the CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation, marking its 40th anniversary this year, a foundation created by Iowa's Norman Borlaug. We left off before the break talking about, the roster of laureates. You reminded us of that, the scientists, agronomists, policy innovators. What does that body of work tell you about where breakthroughs in food security have actually come from?
Well, I think we've seen from the laureates a significant increase in the capacity to produce more food, and the capacity to deal with a changing climate that will, in some circumstances, make it easier, and in many circumstances, it make it more difficult to actually grow the food that we will need now and in the future to feed a growing world population. So I think, but we've seen technology, we've seen sustainable practices being incorporated. I think we've also seen the capacity of nonprofit organizations and entities to deliver the food, to get food to people who need it. Two of the laureates are two U.S. senators by the name of McGovern and Dole. They teamed together in a bipartisan forum to create the McGovern-Dole feeding program. It's a feeding program that basically takes commodities grown and raised in the United States and provides them to school-age children in a variety of countries, linking their ability to get a meal during the day with them getting lessons. They go to school oftentimes in those developing countries not because they want to learn necessarily, but because they know they will get fed. And while they're getting fed, they also learn. So it's a double benefit, if you will. I just did a little tour of a Goodwill facility in Coralville that takes soybean oil that's produced from soybean growers here in Iowa, puts it in large cans, cooking oil, fortifies it with some vitamins, and then ships it all over the world to food insecure locations in Africa and Asia and Central America. And it helps feed countless numbers of families who would be otherwise food insecure, and also helps to employ people with disabilities and give them a set of trainings that could potentially translate into even full-time jobs in other manufacturing facilities. It's a wonderful program, and it's, I think, an extension of the type of thing that we do. And that's what we are trying to do with reference to the World Food Prize. We not only recognize the laureates, but we also have a series of other recognitions. We have our top ag pioneers, people who are doing transformative work. This year we've identified 40 people from around the world that are doing innovative stuff in food and agriculture. We've got the Borlaug Field Award, which is designed to acknowledge the work of a young researcher, someone under the age of 40, that's following the path of Norman Borlaug and doing significant research. And so it's an opportunity and a foundation that's dedicated to lifting up people that are making a difference.
And there are hundreds of students participating in the Borlaug Scholar Program at Iowa State University over the years.
Well,
right?
This is the Youth Institute. That's right. In that Youth Institute, we had a record number this year at the Iowa State campus, 366 young people. They get a credential by participating. They write a paper, 3 to 5 page paper on a food insecure location in the world. They're high school students. They give a presentation, oral presentation of their paper. We then select from that group a number of them to come to Des Moines in October to be part of the Global Youth Institute, because it's not just in Iowa that we have this Youth Institute. We also have youth institutes in 22 other states across the country and in 7 foreign countries. All total, we had this year we'll have 40 different youth institutes. And so we bring literally several hundred of these young people to Iowa to mix and mingle with each other and to have experience with some of the famous and important people that come to the World Food Prize. And then we take a small subset of that group eventually, and we give them an opportunity to be a Borlaug Ruan intern. We place them with researchers around the world. So they have a 4, 6, 8-week internship in the Philippines, in China, in Brazil, in places around the world where they have a life-changing experience as a young person. So it's an opportunity for us to have a youth development component to what we do.
Tom Vilsack is the CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation based in Des Moines, of course, former Iowa governor, 2-time U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. I wanted to probe a little further on, the current administration, now 2+ years in, it's President Trump in his second administration. Probe on a few things having to do with food insecurity, and agriculture. We remember this. It seems like the distant past because news comes at us very quickly these days. The Trump administration effectively ended USAID. An agency had an estimated $5 billion annually for food aid. The World Food Program has warned that cuts could be, in their words, a death sentence for millions. You are someone who worked alongside USAID for 12 years as Ag Secretary. Governor Vilsack, what is it like to watch that institution disappear?
Well, I do a podcast as part of the World Food Prize. I recently was able to interview Samantha Power, who was the USAID administrator in the Biden administration, former UN ambassador as well. The reality is that there was significantly important work being done by the men and women who were dedicated and who worked at USAID, both the political and the career. My wife, Christy, also worked for USAID during the Obama administration, teaching young people all around the world to read. Tremendous work being done. And unfortunately, the speed with which the decision was carried out had ramifications because it didn't give communities that were receiving the help and assistance from USAID the ability to transform, the ability to, in some way, shape, or form, be able to manage the change that was taking place. And the result, of course, is that tragically, many, many people will die as a result of those decisions.
In fact, a study published in The Lancet in February, I believe, projected that the dismantling of USAID, combined with some cuts in the UK, Germany, and Canada, could lead to more than 9 million additional deaths by 2030. That's just a few years from now. Do you accept that projection?
I'm going to assume that the experts know what they're talking about. One of the statistics within that statistic is the significant number of children under the age of 5 who get impacted by these decisions and whose lives are going to be cut short. Now, interestingly enough, what's happening, and it's happened in a number of different areas of the government that were significantly cut and cut back, is that resources are now trickling back into those very same departments. Now, USAID doesn't exist quietly, but they're coming back into the State Department to be able to fund additional programs because there's a recognition and realization that there was good being done. There's always room for improvement. There's always room to do something better and to be more efficient. But the challenge here was a total elimination and a very quick, very short period of time elimination of USAID without any time to transition. If you're going to change, there are ways to do it, and there are ways to effectively promote efficiencies and change in a way that minimizes the harm that results from the change.
So are you optimistic that there is something coming, developing that can fill that vacuum and prevent those deaths?
Well, I'm optimistic of two things. One, I think that there will, over time, be resources returned to a system that hopefully will do an even better job of providing assistance and help. Will it fill the void? Well, that's a very large number. There was quite a bit of help that was coming out of USAID, and I don't think all of that is going to be restored. So then the question is, can the outside community, can the NGO, the non-governmental organizations, can philanthropic organizations, can they help fill the void? And the reality is they are stepping up. But even they will have a difficult time with significant resources. So the challenge, I think, is for us to figure out new and creative ways to leverage those resources, to engage the private sector in addition to the nonprofit sector, and to re-engage government in a thoughtful and formative way. And if we do all of that, then over time, I think we can reduce the number of people who are negatively impacted by this decision. But there's no question that there will be people whose lives will be cut short and people's lives who will significantly change for the worse as a result of this.
The conflict between the United States and Iran has disrupted the Strait of Hormuz. We know in our news every day. Iowa farmers squeezed on both ends. Higher input costs, shrinking markets. From your vantage point, what does that look like? What are we experiencing? And you mentioned, earlier farm crises. Are we tipping into another farm crisis? How close are we?
Well, I'm going to answer that question in a slightly different direction than you might anticipate. I'm going to tell you that I think we've been in a farm crisis for 90% of farms since 1973. And the reason I say that is that in 1973, the U.S. government changed its farm policy from a policy that was managing supply and stabilizing prices and encouraging diversification within agriculture that allowed smaller and mid-sized farming operations to have an opportunity to continue. In 73, rising food prices and the desire to use food as a tool in diplomacy and the possibility of potential exports and the wealth that could create moved the Nixon administration to make the decision to change the farm policy from supply management to production. Farmers were told, go out and produce commodities. We need those commodities. Produce as much as you possibly can. In fact, Secretary Butts once famously said, fence row to fence row, with the warning that you're going to either have to get big or you're ultimately going to have to get out. Since that time, America has lost 990,000 farms. And Iowa, since that time, has lost 28,000 farms. Now, you think of the 28,000 farms, and you think of how many people are in that farm family and how many generations from 1973 there have been. You're talking about a lot of people who once at one point in time would have lived in small communities and rural communities who no longer, who because of the financial mechanism of commodity production focused on large-scale commercial agriculture, it makes it extremely difficult for the smaller farming operations to survive even in good times. So let me give you an example.
Yeah. Hence the hollowing out of our rural communities.
Right. Let me give you an example. Best year ever, farm income, which is not this year. Best year ever.
You're going to go back to the 70s.
No. Best year ever in farm income was 2022. $185 billion of farm income. Okay, got that number?
Okay.
Top 10% of farms in this country who produce a good percentage of what we grow received 85% of that income. Top 10% are 180,000 farms, which means that 1.6 million, or 1.8 million farms, 1.6 million farms had to share the 15% that was left. If you were theoretically to take the 185 billion, multiply it by 85%, and then divide it by 180,000, as if each farm got the same amount, in that top 10%, they would have gotten $833,000. If you did the same for the 1.6 million with the 15%, $17,000. Which is why in that best year ever, there's no tariffs, no fertilizer cost increases, none of that. Best year ever, 50% of farms, they're small, 50% of farms didn't make any money, they lost money. 40% of farms made money, but the majority of money they made to support their families came from off-farm income. So we've essentially created a third option for farms. You can get big, you can get out, which a lot of folks have, or now you can get a job in addition to farming. So you can work two jobs. So when you ask me, how are things out in the farm country? I'm going to tell you right now, there are farm families that have struggled significantly for a long period of time. And I think it is a direct result of a policy that basically focused solely on production. So when I was secretary the second time, the Biden administration put in place a series of programs designed to create a new structure, a new model for those 90% of farms, those smaller farms. It was a model that was based on the theory of instead of the farmer working harder, we'd make the farm work harder. We'd create new revenue streams for that farm. A lot of that effort has been dismantled by the current administration. And, elections have consequences. And what you've outlined, elections have consequences. Presidential decisions have consequences. So when you go to war and you've been told by your advisors that the Strait of Hormuz is likely to be shut down, you got to factor that in, which is why Congress is likely to consider a relief package. But a significant percentage of that relief package is going to go because most subsidies, 74% of subsidies, go to the top 10%, the people that have the money to begin with.
I have to ask, because you were, 12 years under Obama and Biden, Secretary of Agriculture, you're describing a trend that has taken place over decades. But what prevented you from working against that? 12 years is a long time.
We did.
You're the second longest Secretary of Agriculture serving in the U.S.
We began the process in Obama. With a focus on local and regional food systems, a focus on renewable energy production on the farm, with a focus on conversion of agricultural waste. And we put significant resources behind it in the Biden administration. We had a system that was paying farmers who were embracing climate-smart agricultural practices. We were creating a process by which those results could be measured so they could eventually participate in ecosystem service markets. We were creating the opportunity for bio-based manufacturing, taking agricultural waste and converting it into new products with manufacturing jobs in rural places. We invested heavily in renewable energy and created opportunities for the rural electric cooperatives to purchase farm-generated electricity. And we significantly supported a local and regional food system because farmers get a better deal, a better percentage of the food dollar in that system than in the general commercialized system. So there was $20 to $25 billion invested in that system, set up for 3 to 5 years with the idea that we would show that this would work and that it would then be incorporated in future farm bills. Now, did it work? Well, I will tell you a couple of things. One, we saw persistent poverty in rural communities across the country decline. We saw population in rural America increase for the first time in quite some time. And, of course, we had record farm income. And we also had, at the time, record exports. But we also had more people interested in farming and more support for the smaller sized operations. So we did. But I will be the first to admit, we all got it, if you will, from 1973.
Got it wrong?
We got it wrong. We got it wrong. And we thought we had it right. We thought we had it right when we said to small communities, rural communities, here's a good idea. Create new industry, but don't have it connected to agriculture. Do something different than agriculture.
We have to take a short break. We'll be back with the rest of my recent conversation recorded on June 26th of this year with the current CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation, also former governor of Iowa and former two-time U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack. It's River to River from IPR News. Let's get back to the rest of my conversation here on River to River with Tom Vilsack, current CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation, celebrating its 40th year. I wanted to touch on one other recent news item, Secretary Vilsack. A recent Senate Agriculture Committee hearing featured the current USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins, claiming that the Biden administration did nothing to prepare for the new world screwworm. It's in our news. As it moved northward through Central America toward Mexico, the USDA now spending over $1 billion to address the crisis, some of it drawn from Biden-era programs. What is your response to Secretary Rollins' characterization of doing nothing to prepare for the new world screwworm?
It's incorrect. And it's not accurate, and it's not consistent with the facts. When the new world screwworm appeared in Mexico, in the southern part of Mexico, during the Biden administration, the first thing we did was to reach out to Mexican officials and begin the process of providing technical assistance and help and increasing the number of sterile flies that could be used as a tried and true method of trying to restrict and basically solve the problem there. So we took immediate action. Then we allocated resources, several $100 million of resources, in an effort to encourage the Mexican government to construct new facilities to be able to produce more of these sterile flies. We closed the border. We closed ports of entry at late in the administration, in addition to investing in new facilities and investing in more sterile flies and in providing technical assistance and additional surveillance capacity.
In hindsight, could you have done?
No, we did everything we could do. In fact, we were excited about the new facility that Mexico was going to construct, but we wanted the Mexican government had to sign off on the protocols to be used in that facility. We advised the incoming administration of the need for them to move on this and to encourage them to move quickly. They did not. They actually put a stop to the funding for a period of time. There was a delay. They also reopened the border. So this didn't happen on our watch.
Let's talk about a current revolution here. Norman Borlaug's revolution was in seeds and soil science. We have a current revolution that it's hard to make sense of what's happening or where we're heading in algorithms, AI, artificial intelligence. It can already predict crop failures before they happen, optimize water use down to the individual plant. I've been out on a planter where, GPS is looking at what part of the field needs how much water, how much fertilizer. It can model the entire global food supply in real time. Do you think we are beginning a transformative period to a new green revolution? What does AI tell you about what the future of food and food insecurity in agriculture is?
That's a complicated question. Let me break it down. I'm going to distinguish between the developed world and the developing world. What you've outlined has to do with AI and the use in the developed world. And that technology may or may not be available to all the farmers in America. I discussed earlier the 10% and 90%. Mm-hmm. The 10% can probably take advantage of much of that new technology because they can afford it. The other 90%, when they're losing money or not making enough to support their family in the best year ever, in a tough year like this one, it's going to be very difficult for them to access that technology.
So again, the haves and the have-nots.
That's why it's important and necessary for, I believe, for us to create a different system for the 90%, the one that, starting with what we put together during the Biden administration of supporting multiple ways in which that farm can generate multiple sources of revenue at the same time. not just selling a commodity, but selling the environmental result, getting paid not just for what you grow, but how you grow it. Converting your agricultural waste not by over-applying it on land, as often happens, but by actually redirecting it into a processing and manufacturing facility that converts it into something more valuable. Now manure becomes a commodity, not a challenge with water quality. Local and regional food systems, you get a 50, 75 cents return on the food dollar as opposed to the 20 cents that you get when you go through the normal commercial. So there needs to be a different system in order for people to have the resources to be able to take advantage of all this newfangled technology. To me, the most exciting thing about AI is it's obviously going to increase and accelerate the way in which research can be conducted so that we can learn more about biologicals, for example, the ability to develop cocktails, if you will, that go into the soil that can enhance its capacity to sequester carbon, enhance its capacity to retain water, enhance its capacity to be resilient. That, to me, in the developed world in particular, becomes really, really important because we need to be very concerned about our soil health if we're going to continue to be productive in the developed world. In the developing world, AI right now, the application, folks will tell you one of the most important and significant uses of the application of AI is in weather forecasting. It's all well and good to talk about precision agriculture, but but the farmer in India isn't ready. It isn't in a position where precision agriculture is what he or she needs. That farmer needs to know precisely when in the monsoon season they're supposed to plant and when they're supposed to harvest. AI can provide better weather forecasting information to allow that farmer a better decision about when to plant and when to harvest, which will obviously increase productivity. So I think there are different uses of it, and it's like everything else. There are good things about it. There are also some challenges with it in terms of its impact on employment related to agriculture. Mm-hmm. And now folks are going to try to deal with that issue and making sure that we do a better job than we have in the past. When we get new technologies, we all get excited about the new technologies. We don't really do a particularly good job of transitioning the people whose lives get turned upside down by the new technology.
We just let it happen.
We just let it happen.
Yeah.
And I became sensitive to this when we had cars that could drive themselves. I'm a former cab driver. I put myself 1 year through a law school by driving a cab. And every time I hear of one of these self-propelled vehicles, I'm thinking of the poor cab driver. What does he do? What does she do? And we don't do a particularly good job of transitioning people. And I think that's another challenge for developed countries to be able to figure out how you create that new job opportunity and prepare that person whose job is being eliminated for that new opportunity.
I'm interested in drilling down on a facet about AI and food security around the world that I've been reading about. The countries and corporations that control the most sophisticated AI tools will also control enormous amounts of intelligence about where food is vulnerable, where supply chains can be squeezed, where harvest is about to fail. So I wonder, does AI, in your view, make the geopolitics of food more dangerous, less dangerous? Does it depend? Is that an open question?
I'm not sure that a single technology by itself is responsive to your question. I'm not sure that I would agree that AI by itself, but your question presupposes that the utilization of AI, right? The utilization of AI. And I think what we're now finding, which is of deep concern, is that food is now once again being used as a weapon in conflict areas. So it's not necessarily AI, but it's individuals understanding that if they can choke off the supply of food in a war-torn area, they can have an impact.
For instance, where right now?
Well, Russia invaded Ukraine, and one of the first things they did was to try to block Ukraine's ability to export their wheat. Now, when that happened, it created a bit of a chaos in where? The Middle East. Why? Because there's a significant reliance on Ukrainian wheat to make the bread that is consumed in great quantities in places like Egypt. So you could foment potentially discontent by folks not having access to bread because you've shut off exports. Gaza, the situation in Gaza, where aid was not getting into people who were in need. That's another example. So there is I think a growing concern on the part of people who study security on the fact that food is now being used as a weapon of war, and I think we ought to be sensitive to that. There are international accords that basically say that's against international law. I think we need to recognize that, and I think there needs to be some enforcement mechanisms at the international level so that people understand that we're serious about this. That this has historically been one thing where we've always said, well, one of the reasons why Hoover's work, as you mentioned, during World War I in Belgium was because the English and the French basically prevented food from getting into Belgium when it was controlled by the Germans until Hoover came along and said, well, how about we do this? Mm-hmm. And he created a structure and system. And even then, there was significant danger associated with it because they had to get ships full of our wheat to Belgium. And that required going through areas that had already been mined, very similar to what we're experiencing today with the Strait of Hormuz, right? Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, the Iranians have basically understood that in an asymmetrical war where the United States has all the firepower, how does Iran respond? Well, they respond by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and creating economic challenges. And, that's how the world works. And you got to think about that when you make decisions to go to war.
Coming to the end of our conversation here, circling back to Norman Borlaug, a centerpiece of our conversation. If Norman Borlaug were alive today, as mentioned, he died in 2009. If he were alive today watching USAID disappear, watching tariffs reshape trade, watching humanitarian aid systems strain, what do you think he would say, having known him?
Well, I think the first thing he would do is he would do something. He would do something. It's one thing to say. It's another thing to do. And I think his expectation would be that each of us would do something. So what he might have done or would do would be to go to the farmer and say, how can we create a circumstance where you're more productive, you're more profitable, you can reduce your reliance on fertilizer. Are there ways in which you can be an even better farmer? And what can I do as a researcher, as an agronomist, somebody who knows the science of this? How can I use science to help you be a better farmer? That's what he would do. And then he would look to you and me and say, what are you doing? What are you doing? If you're in policy making, are you creating policies that enhance and expand assistance or help? Or are you making a different set of decisions? If you're not in government and you're in the private sector, what are you doing? Are you contributing? Are you having your employees involved in food drives? Are you working with the local food bank? If you are in the nonprofit world, what are you doing? Are you figuring out more creative ways to leverage what you do to be more effective?
World Food Prize, 40 years old this year in 2026. Let's go another 40 years into the future. Because the prize has recognized so many breakthroughs we couldn't have imagined in 1986. What's the breakthrough you think, or some sense of the breakthrough we'll be celebrating in 2066, one that perhaps changes the trajectory of hunger on this planet?
Well,
or is that too far out?
Well, it is for me, Ben. You may be around 40 years from now.
I doubt it.
But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be. But I would say this: the population is going to continue to increase, and we're going to have to get very serious, as several of our recent laureates have suggested in a letter which they signed 2 years ago, telling us to increase significantly agricultural research, we've got to get very serious about figuring out ways in which we're going to produce more with less, because climate's going to be a challenge. You look at what's going on in Europe right now with these heat waves. I can guarantee you that heat wave that they're experiencing is going to have an impact on their capacity to grow. We've had intense storms here in the United States. That is going to impact our ability to produce. And so hopefully within 40 years, we have used science, we've used innovation, and we've equipped the farmer with the capacity to do things in a sustainable way so they're producing. We've figured out ways to reduce food loss and waste, which is at an extremely unacceptable level. And we've figured out a way in which we can we've expanded the number of things that we are capable of eating. This is an interesting statistic. I was interviewing the head of CGI.
On your podcast.
On the podcast. I was a CGIer. And as she was explaining, there are 500,000 plants in the ecosystem today. 500,000.
500,000.
And plants and crops. Okay, 500,000.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably got the number wrong, but you'll get.
I know where you're going.
You'll get the sense. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Of that number, we eat about 125. Not 125,000.
Of a 500,000.
125. We could probably eat thousands, but we just don't know it. So one of the things that's likely to happen is that our understanding of what is edible and what is good to eat and what is good for us will likely expand, because this food's, it's out there. We're just not eating it. We don't even know it exists. We don't even know that flour we just walked by is high in, XYZ that would be great for. So I think that's one thing. And I think the second thing is food's going to be tailored. So you'll go in the grocery store and you'll have a particular medical condition or a propensity by virtue of your genetics. You need to eat more of this and eat less of this. You'll know it. It'll be sort of personalized. And that's pretty amazing.
All right. You've been very generous with your time. Tom Vilsack, CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation, marking its 40th anniversary this year. And I assume you can find more about the 40th anniversary celebrations and events at worldfoodprize.org. I did my part for making you stay in your position too, Tom Vilsack.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Take care. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Today's program was produced by Danny Gear. Our executive producer is Catherine Perkins. Hey, I hope you know that River to River is also available as a podcast. Just subscribe to River to River, the podcast, using your favorite podcast app. It's a good way not to miss River to River and to share our discussions with others. You just send a podcast link via text or email. I'm Ben Kieffer. Thanks for joining us.